Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to this afternoon's webinar, Mastering Mistakes in Sage 50 Payroll. My name's Alice and I'm going to be your host and presenter for the session today, which I'm expecting to last around 45 minutes. And a little look at what we've got in store for you today. So I am going to begin with an introduction to mastering mistakes, so what kind of mistakes you could be correcting and different options you've got in order to correct them. Followed by some of those options, so restoring a backup or using the rollback option. We'll be taking a look at both of those, focusing on the rollback option today. Then once you've made that correction, we'll be talking about how to submit those changes to HMRC, so how you're going to inform them of any differences to employees' pay, for example. And then another section there just on adjusting your employees' pay, amongst other things as well, so things like pensions, nominal link, just a bit of advice on some further things that you might need to consider after making an adjustment. And then as always, we will finish with some further support. And as I said just at the beginning there, I will be staying on to answer all of your questions as well. But that is what we've got in store. So beginning with that introduction then, first thing we are going to take a look at is just some examples of things that can go wrong. Definitely more things that can go wrong than what I've got here, but these are just some of the more common mistakes that people do tend to need to correct in payroll. And we're hoping that this webinar should give you some confidence just to know what to do and how to fix certain situations. So a couple of examples, you might have overpaid or underpaid someone, you might have missed off a payment for them. You might have some statutory payment errors. You might have forgot to add statutory pay, for example. You could have processed payroll on the wrong pay date. You might have forgotten to change somebody's tax code or had them on the wrong national insurance category. Or you could have pension errors as well. So you might have needed to change the contribution value for somebody or had them on the wrong scheme, something like that. So today we're going to look at options of ways that you can put things like this right. Now for this, there is two main options. The first one is being to correct the error in the next pay run. So let's say you've just had like a small under or overpayment for an employee. You might just choose to adjust the next payments that you give them to accommodate for that mistake. This way means that no payroll history is going to be changed, and that correction is going to be carried forward to the next pay period and done there. Now this also means that you won't need to do any manual adjustments and you won't need to submit any adjustments to HMRC either, but you will of course have to wait a little bit longer as the mistake is instead going to be corrected in the next pay run. So you aren't able to kind of rectify it with the employee there and then. That's one option you've got. The next option is actually what we're going to be focusing on the webinar today, and that's going to be to reprocess your payroll. So what this involves is going back to the original period where the mistake happened and then entering the corrected pay values. One important thing to bear in mind here though is that you would also need to reprocess any other pay periods between the mistake date and then your current pay date just to bring your payroll records back up to date again. Then once you've completed that correction, you'll also need to submit something called an FPS adjustment to HMRC. We will cover that a bit later in the webinar, and a couple of other things to consider too, which we do have a section for. Now, if you do decide to go back and reprocess, as this often is the better option, there are a few things to consider. So before the correction, you do need to make sure that you've got the original information. So this is going to be things like the employee's pay slips, the P32 report, if you've made the payment to HMRC as well, the record of any pension payments that you might have made, or things like the nominal link transactions too. So they're all really, really handy things to have before the correction. You'll also need to consider what you've done since. So this could be payment periods that you've processed since, because remember, you will have to process the payroll back up to date again. And this could be for one employee, it could be a few people, or it could be for all of your employees. It really does depend on what mistake you're correcting and which method that you're using to correct it to. And since we are still near the beginning of the tax year, it is also important to just consider whether the mistake was in a previous tax year. If it was, very similar concept of how to correct the mistakes, but just a few things are going to be a little bit different, and we will talk about that as we go on. You'll then need to consider how to make the correction. So are you going to restore or recover a backup, or are you going to use the rollback wizard option as well? That is another option that you could use. Whichever of these options that you use, you will then have to enter the corrected values. So you'll set your process date to the date that you need to correct, amend any information that you need, out a second there. So yeah, you will have to kind of enter those corrected values and essentially just reprocess that period from that pay period that you went back to. And afterwards, just a couple things there. So you will need to obviously adjust your employee's pay itself. So whether you owe them money or they owe you money, kind of how to figure that out. Adjusting HMRC payments that you might have need. Obviously, submit those adjustments to HMRC in the FPS adjustment if you need to. And other things as well you might need to consider, so things like pensions, nominal link, maybe even the EPS if you do recover statutory payments, and that's kind of change any of the values there too. Now we will try and touch on as much of these as we can throughout the session. As I said, we are going to focus on the rollback option today. But before we move on to rolling back, I do want to start with a little bit about restoring a backup and recovering a backup too. Each of these are different ways that you can go back to the mistake. So for those of you who've seen our webinars before, you know we always advise that you take backups of your data. You are prompted to at particular points in your pay run. So when you update the records or run the pension assessment, for example, you are prompted there. This means that your backup, your data is backed up. So should it ever get damaged, corrupted or lost, you've got it there. If you ever need to, go back to it, make a correction or get it back somehow because something's been damaged. Now you can take your own backups, whether that's by going to File and Backup or when you're prompted to. And these backups that you've taken, these can be restored into Payroll. So you can restore your own backups. You also can recover a backup. This will be an automatic backup taken by Payroll. And these automatic backups are taken as you update the records. Now these are ideal if you have forgotten to take a backup yourself, or maybe you've lost where you've saved it, for example, you do still have that recover option. Now, when you restore or recover a backup, what that's going to do is going to overwrite any of the existing data with the backup's data. So anything you've done in payroll since that backup was taken would then need to be reprocessed to get your payroll records back up to date again, as you've essentially taken a step back in time. And when to use these options as well. So you might restore or recover a backup for recent mistakes. Maybe if you've just updated the records, for example, and you've realised that you forgot to add a certain payment, really good for situations like that. These options are also better suited for mistakes which affect all or a lot of your employees. So since it does overwrite the payroll data with the backup data, the restore option and the recover option will affect all of your employees. Very important to bear that in mind. Another important thing to note when you are restoring a backup, and you're in the Restore wizard, which I'll show you shortly, you do have the option to select the file types that you'd like to restore. And depending on what you select in here, those types of files are going to be overwritten by the backup. Now, ordinarily, it will just be the data files only that need to be restored to fix a mistake. So data files, this is going to include your basic data, so payments, company information and things as well. But you do also have RTI files. Now this is your real-time information data, so your FPS, EPSs, and things like that. That very important to mention here, the RTI files should only be selected in very specific circumstances. So if you are instructed by our technical support team, for example, don't just select it because you fancy it, you see it there kind of thing. It probably will cause you problems if you do accidentally select that there. The reason why you don't normally restore RTI files is because if you did, and then you corrected your mistake, because you've taken a step back in time with the RTI files as well, Payroll no longer knows that the original FPS and things was sent, and it will allow you to send another full FPS. What that's going to do is essentially duplicate your liabilities and figures to HMRC for the pay period. Now, this will likely result in HMRC expecting you to pay ultimately a much higher liability than you meant to, which I'm assuming nobody wants to do. So, moral of the story, if you are restoring a backup, very important to only select data files, and that is how it is as default, unless you have been otherwise instructed by one of my colleagues, for example. But with all that being said, let's just head into the demonstration straight away. Just want to show you my company here. So I have a monthly payroll We can see I have actually already completed my April pay run, so last updated last FPS date, 30th of April. But in this scenario, I've actually looked at my reports and I've realised that I've made an error and I've missed off a payment for most of my employees in the new tax year, so in April. Now, since this affects most of my employees and it's a recent mistake, I could actually decide to restore a pre-update backup from April and reprocess that period with that missing payment. Now, the restore route will allow me to go back in time, correct those payments for my employees, and then just reprocess everyone back up to date again. So essentially just re-update the records, but this time correctly. Now, when I do payroll, I do tend to take 2 backups per pay run. I tend to take a pre-update and a post-update backup. So once I've completed my pay run. Do feel free to take more, always better to be safe than sorry, but that way I've got 2 backups should I ever need to restore some of those. So it's also helpful to save them with names. So just a couple of examples here for my company right now. You can see I've got a pre and post update backup for month 10, month 11, month 12. And then for April, so month 1 of the 25-26 tax year, you can see I've got a pre and post backup there. I've named them appropriately and I know exactly what they are. So if I need to restore those, which potentially I do now, I know exactly which one to go for. So how we're going to restore that? Well, we're just going to go to the File menu in the top left and then just down to Restore. And that's going to bring up this wizard which will kind of walk you through step by step what to do. Now this first page, this has got recent backups that have been taken in this company and other companies too. So if the backup that you need is here, you would just be able to select it. But if not, you can just leave this page blank. And then we'll click Next. And this next page, this is where it's really important to check that you've only got data files selected, unless of course you've been told otherwise. We'll click Next again, and this is where you'll be able to browse to the backup file. And we know exactly where that is. So we'll click Browse. I'm just going to go to my backups folder, and it's going to be the pre-update April backup that I need. So I'll select that, click Next, a little bit of information about the Restore wizard there, and then I'll click Finish. Now, once you do click Finish, it's going to kind of work through and restore that data. You will also be prompted to enter your password again, just like an extra bit of security there. Double check your process date. It's ideal at this point just to make sure that's going to be the date that you've gone back to. And then click OK. I'll just log in as normal. Again, it'll finish restoring that data for you. And there we go, that's all done. I'll just get rid of this one for you as well. So the Restore wizard is essentially telling Payroll that we want to overwrite the data files from the moment in time that that backup was taken. And as we can see, it's changed my last updated date to March, so the month before, as we are now prior to April's records being updated. But notice my last FPS date, that's still showing as April. That's actually exactly what I want, so I do not need to send another normal FPS. As I said, that would duplicate my liabilities. I'll just need to send another FPS adjustment, an FPS adjustment once the corrections are done. Now that I've restored the backup, it would just be a case of reprocessing the employees correctly this time. So I've already set my process date. It would just be a case of kind of working through your tasks as normal. So enter payments. I would add on that missing bonus that I'd missed for everyone, kind of work through people's payments. Obviously, I'll just do this quickly for today. A couple of different things there with it being the new tax year. And after this, any pre-update tasks that you'd normally do, if you do the pension assessment, you would do that, produce new pay slips for the employees and any other pre-update reports that you might need. And then it would just be a case of updating the records to bring them back up to date again. Now, I'm not going to reprocess in any detail just yet. I will be a little bit later in the webinar though, but I did just want to show you how you would be able to restore if you did pick that option. So what I'll do now, I'm just going to really quickly restore my data back up to date again, just to show you a different option. So again, I'm just finding that back up. This time we're going right back up to date again, including the mistake. And this time I'm going to show you the recover option. So this is a different way of getting back to a backup. Perfect. So we are now back up to date again. We can see that last updated date's changed to April again. And this time we're going to do recovering a backup. So remember, the Recover Wizard is a way of going back to an automatic backup that the payroll itself took as you were about to update the records. So this is really good if you've forgotten to take a backup, but you still need to get back to a certain time, or if you've just lost the backup that you'd taken. In a similar way, you're going to do this. You're going to go to File, but this time we'll just go to Recover. Still comes up with the Recover Wizard. It does also prompt you to take a backup before you go ahead with this process, but we'll click Next. And it's going to come up with all of the different pay periods and things that you've updated in the current tax year. So you'll be able to see the tax month that you've updated, the pay date or process date that it was set to, and the payment frequency as well. So we've got M for monthly. If it was weekly, for example, it would be a W, and then the date and time that the backup was created. So in the Recover Wizard, just a case of selecting the earliest period that you want to go back to, and then you would click Next. You get a little bit more information about kind of what to do after you've recovered, so reprocessing and checking various reports and things like that. And then to finish recovering your data, you would just need to click Finish. So as I said, Recover option, this is great if you can't find your backup or you've forgotten to take one. And same as the Restore option, the recovery of your data, it would change your last updated date to allow you to go ahead and make those corrections for the period and then reprocess your payroll back up to date again. But again, it would not change the last FPS date, because instead what you'd need to do is send an FPS adjustment once you've made those corrections. So that was how to restore or recover. Those options, of course, are more suitable for mistakes which affect most or all of your employees. And do remember, only select data files. That is how it's kind of selected as default, unless you have been otherwise instructed. The next option that I do want to look at, this is the rollback option. This is different to restoring or recovering though. So rather than overwriting all of the payroll data for all of your employees, the rollback option instead is going to remove the payment history for one or more selected employees. So only the employees that you've selected to be in the rollback process will have their payment history removed. And as you can see on that screenshot on the right there, you can still choose the pay period to roll back to and reprocess from there. So this is best to use for mistakes which affect one or a few employees when you need to go back and reprocess any earlier periods. Maybe you don't have a backup available, or of course it's only one or two people that you need to correct. As I say, the beauty of a rollback is when it comes to correcting the mistakes, you only need to correct and reprocess the employees that have rolled back. So it does save you a bit of time there. But with that, bear in mind, you would only be able to reproduce the pre-update reports for those employees that you've rolled back, as everyone else is going to remain up to date. Little top tip as well, especially around this time of year, if you do need to roll back to a previous tax year, you first need to roll back the current tax year. And I will be showing you how to do this in a demonstration. Essentially, you just need to roll back in kind of two different chunks, so a tax year at a time. But let's go ahead and look at that rollback option then. So back to payroll. And I actually have something I need to correct for an employee. So this employee, I need to go back a few months to fix something for them. Just to show you what I mean, I'm going to open the record. Because this employee's recently hit state retirement age, that was a couple of months ago, we can see they turned 66 in the middle of February. So I did get messages to tell me to change the national insurance category, but for whatever reason, I just didn't get round to it. So if I check the history tab, yeah, I can see they're still being updated all the way up to April on category A. This has been wrong since their birthday, and it should have been changed to C back when I was doing February's payroll. Now, in order to fix this, what I'm going to do is roll back this employee for those months where the national insurance category was incorrect. And top tip from me, before you actually reprocess anything, I did touch on this before, but make sure you've got a backup of your data. Very, very important there. Also make sure that you've got the original information of what's been paid to hand. So this could be the payslip for the employee, the P32 as well if you have paid HMRC already. Yeah, any other reports that you might need. Now, if you don't have the payslip, a little tip for you. In the payroll link section, so that's just here, and you can resize that if necessary, you do have the option to reprint payslips. Now, this is a really good option if you haven't, got the payslip for anyone and you need to get historical ones. So let's just get them from February. So that's when I'm going to correct the mistake, up to April, and click OK. And you'll be able to get historical versions of all of the different payslips there. So let's just look at a laser payslip. Preview this. So exactly the same layouts as the pre-update options that you've got. It's just a way of being able to get to them after you've updated the records. So these will be really good to compare to once you've made the mistakes. You know if there is any difference to the pay and whether you need to give the employee anything or whether they owe you any money next period, for example. So we've got February's, March's and April's payslip there for employee number 6. Just helps you kind of work out the difference in the pay when it comes to adjusting payments and things a bit later. But let's actually roll back this employee now then. So I've highlighted them. You can do this for multiple people at a time as well. So let's say you had like 3 people you need to roll back. Just make sure that you've selected them. You're then going to go to the tasks menu. And about halfway down, you've got the option for roll back. Again, it's going to wizard to kind of walk you through the steps there. And you are prompted to take a backup at this point. And this isn't reversible, so definitely take one if you haven't got one already. Click next and then just double check that you've got the right person or right people highlighted. If you haven't, you can cancel out of the process and obviously just make sure that you've selected the right people then. But otherwise, click next. And this next window is going to show any updated periods in the current tax year, hence why we only have April showing. But if I was only going back one period to correct something, I would just be able to select April and then kind of finish the rollback from here to make the correction. But as I said, I am going back a few months to fix this mistake, and I need to go back to the previous tax year. So in order to do that, I'm going to have to roll back to the mistake in 2 separate chunks. So first thing I'm going to have to do is roll back any periods in the current tax year. So that'll be April. And I'll just click next and finish. Now, since we are rolling back the earliest period in the tax year here, it does bring up this message, just asking if you want to remove the following information. Be very careful with this message, though, if it does come up for you. I would get into the habit of just making sure that you don't whiz through the rollback process, just in case you do miss something like this and end up clicking the wrong thing. So this is going to be all the year-to-dates and things for the employee. I'm going to click no. I don't want to remove these year-to-dates. And then we'll be able to see that process is now complete. So last updated date has now changed for the employee back to March. So all the kind of current tax year has been removed. But I still need to get back to last tax year. So second chunk of the rollback, I'm going to change my process date now. We'll just go back to the earliest period that I'm correcting. So 28th of April for me, that was my pay date. Perfect. And now that we're back in the previous tax year, same process again. So I'm just going to go back to tasks and roll back. And this time we're going to roll back to the mistake, to the earliest period that we need to correct. So I'll click next. Again, just double check the employee is selected there. And this is probably most likely what you're going to see, something a bit similar to this with multiple different pay periods in there. So any period that you've updated for the employee in the tax year. I need to go back to February. That's the earliest date there, the earliest pay date that I'm correcting. I'll click next and I'll click finish. Perfect. So again, just notice the employee's last updated date. This is now changed to the 31st of January. So that's the rollback done. 2 chunks there just because we were going back to a previous tax year. At this point, what I can now do is go into the record and amend the national insurance category to category C, so actually make that correction. So I'll go to employment. I'm going to click C. That's the category they should have been on since the birthday. and then click Save. So that is the correction kind of done. Of course, the national insurance category is now correct, but I need to get the employee back up to date again. So re-update their payroll back up to April where I was before. Now to do this, I don't actually need to manually change their pay. They were still given the same salary. What I need to do is just let payroll calculate the pay with this new national insurance category. So I've checked my process date, just double check that in the bottom right corner. And if I go to open enter payments, perfect. I've just double checked there, and because they're now a national insurance category C, I've got no national insurance calculating there for the employee. That's exactly what I need. So I'll just click Save Next. The net pay has increased slightly as well, but I'll come back to that a bit later. So nothing else to change here, just need to save and kind of move on to produce their February payslip. Any other reports that you might need at this point too. So feel free to complete any other pre-update tasks that you normally would, but just bear in mind you would only be able to run these for this employee. So everyone else is still up to date. This is the only employee that you can get pre-update reports and do those tasks for. But once you're happy with that, update the records for February again. So we'll just go through that process. And that is February back up to date again. We don't need to send an FPS adjustment at this point. What we'll do is we'll wait until all of the corrections are done. So at this point, we're just going to go back to change our process date and move on to the next period that we're updating. So this will be March. We'll click OK. Same process again, a little bit repetitive at this point, but we'll go back to enter payments. Just let payroll calculate with that new national insurance category. Double check the net pay. Any other pre-update tasks and things you might need, and then it'll be a case of skipping to update the records. Perfect. Great, and that's re-updated now to March. So for the previous tax year, 24-25, all of these corrections are now done. So if we go back into the employee's record, we of course can see that it's changed to category C. And on the history tab, yep, I can see they've now been reprocessed correctly since their birthday, so February and March. Also with that slightly increased net pay as well, so a little bit of a difference for them. Now, this is where corrections are a little bit different across the two tax years, because I actually need to inform HMRC of the adjustments to the 24-25 tax year before I can update April of 25-26 and bring this employee completely back up to date again. So similar to how we rolled back in two chunks, we are going to have to kind of submit that correction to HMRC in two chunks as well. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to pause this correction here for now. We'll go back to the slides, we'll talk about submitting to HMRC, and then we'll come back to the demo and kind of show actually submitting and kind of what we need to submit at those points too. So with the rollback, we did choose who to roll back. That was just employee number 6. And we used the wizard to choose the period that we wanted to go back to. Rollback option, this is better for mistakes which affect one or just a small number of employees, as everyone else is left untouched. And remember, if you are rolling back to a previous tax year, you first of all have to roll back anything in the current tax year. And just be beware of that year-to-date message as well. Just don't accidentally clear those if you don't want to. But let's look at submitting the HMRC then. There are two submissions that I'd like to talk about. The first one you've probably come across before. So first one, this is just called an FPS adjustment. But the FPS adjustment is going to be submitted to HMRC to inform them of the difference between an original FPS and the corrected values. And it's submitted once all of the correction is complete and payroll's completely back up to date again. So an FPS adjustment, this is a submission for the current tax year. So in this case, 25-26. If you were correcting multiple periods, you would just need to send one FPS adjustment, which includes all of the differences for all of the different periods that you've corrected. Now, if you are correcting more than one period, the liability adjustment in the submission window will show the difference for the most recent period, but not for the previous. The previous periods are still included in the submission, but it's not kind of shown in that submission window, so just bear that in mind. As I say, I will show you how to submit an FPS adjustment once we've reprocessed April and everything's back up to date again. Another submission to mention, very similar to an FPS adjustment, but since we've reached the end of our corrections in the previous tax year, at this point what we need to do is send and amend a previous tax year submission. As I say, very similar to the FPS adjustment, still shows the difference between original FPS values and the corrected values, but this submission instead is for a previous tax year, and you can actually use this option to submit amendments for the 2 previous tax years. Important to mention as well, just to submit the amendment before you start reprocessing in the current tax year, hence why we've paused the demonstration for now. And the same goes with the liability adjustment, as I mentioned with the FPS adjustment. So let's go ahead and get these submitted then. I'm just going to go ahead and submit that amended previous tax year option as we're in the position to do so now. Everything's corrected for the previous tax year. So with this employee highlighted, first thing I'm going to do to submit this is change my process date to the last day of the tax year that we're correcting. So last day of the previous tax year, 5th of April 2025. From here, I'm going to go to the e-submission section, and you'll see you've got the option there on the left to amend a previous tax year. Just a case of clicking on this and working through the submission. Now, you will likely get this message just to say that it's late. Just a case of selecting the reason for why it's late. So mine's just going to be that I'm correcting an earlier submission. And then click OK. And this will look kind of, well, very similar to your normal FPS window. So just work through this. We'll click Continue, check those company details, and click Submit. And in here, notice you've only got the employee that we've selected, and you've got that total liability adjustment for them showing as well. And we'll just click Submit. So once this has been sent to HMRC, they'll have been informed of the adjustments to the previous tax year. And at this point, what I can do is now move my process date back to April's pay date. So just 30th of April for me. And make the correction to the current tax year. So very similar process to what we've done before. I'm just going to double check the national insurance category. Perfect, so that on category C. And the same process as before, we're just going to go to enter payments, let payroll calculate with that new national insurance category, and of course the increased net pay. Any other pre-update tasks you need, new pay slip and things, for example, and then just skip ahead to update the records for them. You will get this message as well, just with it being the first period in the new tax year. I'll click Next and Finish. Perfect, and that is April updated for them. We can now see the last updated and last FPS data both matching. That's a good indicator to tell you that you're right back up to date again. At 30th of April there. So all my adjustments are done. And now that I'm back up to date again, I'm going to inform HMRC of the amendments that I made in the current tax year. So this is going to be that other submission that I mentioned, just the FPS amendment. Couple of places that you can find this, either just going to be from your payroll tasks. Just scroll down, just underneath the full submission, you've got FPS adjustment section. You do have that option for FPS adjustment. Same reason as before, really, just going to be a correction to an earlier submission. I'll click OK. And yeah, this basically looks exactly the same as before. So we're going to continue, check those company details and click Submit. And yeah, we've just got that same employee again. Remember, it will only show people who obviously are included in this, and it will only show adjustments to the current period as well. Any other previous periods that you might have updated and corrected will still be included in the submission, but just won't be kind of visible in this submission window. Perfect. So if you had only corrected periods in the current tax year, obviously you would just need to send one FPS adjustment. You wouldn't need to worry about the previous tax year at all. You would also be able to just roll back in one go rather than the 2 chunks like we did. Perfect. But that is your FPS adjustment, and of course the amended previous tax year option 2. Just a little reminder of how to submit the amended previous tax year submission as well. So yep, just change your process date to the 5th of April of the year that you are adjusting. Go to e-submissions and you'll have the option there. So just a case of working through that submission window, checking the employee details, and then you do have visibility of that liability adjustment there too. On all the slides as well, I have linked more information. We've got some help articles throughout the slides there. So if you do want more information on each of the things that we've talked about, just click on those articles at the bottom if you've downloaded the handout. You can also find them on the Help Centre at sage.co.uk/help. But now that that's done, that is everything you need to do to correct the payroll side of things. So at this point, what we're going to do is just move on to the last section of the webinar, which is adjusting your employees' pay and any other things that you might need to consider too. Now, this is mainly just some advice. Obviously, each company might do this differently, so it's just kind of more of a reminder of the things that you might need to do. Probably the main thing, this is going to be changes to the net pay for the employee. As I said before, always a good idea to compare the old payslip with the new payslip just to see the difference. So here I've got screenshots of payslips from the employee showing mainly the difference to the national insurance contributions, since of course we corrected that national insurance category. So just take one from the other and you can work out how much more you need to pay the employee as a result of those corrections. Now, a few options of how to pay them. Of course, you can do this outside of payroll. But if you do want it to be included on the next payslip, you can actually use a post-tax, post-national insurance payment to make that, to kind of pay that to them in the next period. Now, alternatively, if you do have an overpayment, you can arrange to make deductions from your employee, again, outside of payroll, or same again, if you want to put it through payroll and have that on the payslip, you can agree like a deduction amount to take after tax and national insurance until it's paid back. Really helpful article on this slide actually. So if you are kind of struggling with what type of pay element you need to pay them back with or deduct with, this article will talk you through kind of working out what type of pay element to use. And if you don't have a pay element set up, it will also tell you how to set it up. So really good for things like this. Also, just to consider HMRC payments, so similar thing, you're just going to check the original P32 report, and that'll show what you've originally paid them against the new P32 report. So once you've made those corrections and things, you'll just compare the total amounts due. This is actually now going to be on line 23 of the report. It did used to be line 21, but there has been 2 extra lines added to the P32 after the introduction of statutory neonatal care pay as of course, April of the new tax year. But if you owe HMRC money, you've checked that line 23 and you can see a difference there. Add that onto your next payment to HMRC. Or if you've paid them too much, you can deduct that from your next payment. That's generally how it's done, but if you do have any questions regarding amendments to what you've paid HMRC, it will be HMRC themselves that you can contact there for further support. Another thing to bear in mind, kind of relating to the P32 as well, is recovery values for things like statutory maternity or paternity pay. If the corrections that you've made have affected these amounts that you've recovered on the P32, you will need to send a new employer payment summary, so an EPS, just to report those changes. And of course, it will have the updated year-to-date values too. Pension payments, a lot of variety with this one. There's so many different ways that you can submit or upload to your pension provider. But I would advise just comparing the original pension information from reports that you might have with the kind of current pension information that you've got after the corrections. And then I would advise at that point contacting your pension provider for advice on how to submit any differences that there might be in contributions. I do know there are a few providers where you can manually amend the contributions on your like pension provider portal, but I'm not 100% sure with that because it can change from provider. So 100% just double check with them on how they prefer you to do that. And lastly, for nominal link, if any of you are using that to post across 2 accounts, if you reprocess an earlier period, you will be prompted to send those postings again. You will actually get a bit of an error message if you don't. But obviously that kind of duplicates up those journals for the employees that you're posting. So a few different options with this one. You can either post them again and then reverse the original journals in accounts, Or what you could do is post a file. I do have a help article link there just on how you'd be able to do that. So you could post a file and make manual adjustments to the existing postings that are in accounts. Just might be worth double checking how your company would prefer you to do this. But yeah, there are a couple of options with that. And as I said, if you don't repost them, you will get a message in Payroll just saying that you've got incomplete postings, and that will kind of keep popping up until you've kind of, figured it out with one of those options. Now, my colleagues Duncan and Michael, they have very recently ran a few webinars covering nominal link. So it kind of goes from the payroll side to the account side and kind of switching through them and just showing you that whole process. Those are available to watch at sage.co.uk/webinars. So if you do want to know a bit more about that, I'm sure they do cover the kind of incomplete postings message as well. Be sure to check that one out. But yeah, just a couple more things really to consider after you've made corrections. So that does kind of bring us to the end of the content today. We have a couple of minutes left, so I do just want to make you aware of some further support that we've got available to you. Don't forget as well, do check out the extra support links that we've included on the slides by downloading the handout. And I've not kind of got around to answering all of the questions yet, but if you do see any answers towards the end that you want to keep, by all means copy and paste those and keep them for future reference too. Now, for webinars, we do run these throughout the whole year for Sage 50 Payroll, and we've got loads coming up for the next few months. We've had Mastering Mistakes today, but we do have a very exciting new webinar badge series throughout June. That's the Pensions Discovery 2025 badge series. So what I'm going to do, I just want to play a short video for you where my colleague Matt is going to tell you all about that, including kind of what the sessions are and how you can earn that badge. And yeah, I will be back in a couple of moments to go through the rest of the further support. So yep, let me play this video and I'll be 2 moments.
Get ready to earn your Pension Discovery badge with Sage 50 Payroll. Join us this June for our fantastic new webinar series where you'll learn everything you need to know about pensions to get you ready to confidently process pensions for your employees. With 7 live sessions and a fun learning quiz in the last session. Whether you're new to pensions or a dab hand, we have something for everyone. Here is what we've got lined up for you. Make a strong start to your pension processing with foundational knowledge on the basics of pensions and salary sacrifice pensions in Sage 50 Payroll. Explore how pension contributions are calculated and how your employees are assessed for automatic enrolment. We'll also take you through our 3 most popular sessions: Navigating Enrolment, Getting Started with Pensions module, and using Pensions Data Exchange to send your pension data to your provider with ease. And lastly, backed by popular demand, test your knowledge with our Pensions Discovery quiz to see what you've learned across the sessions. Now, how do you get your hands on your Pensions Discovery digital badge? Simply attend 5 out of 7 of the live sessions and our quiz to earn your badge. And don't forget, you get free access to our new Accredible portal to manage your badges, so you can quickly and easily share your badge on socials for everyone to see. Don't miss out. Secure your spot and join us for an unforgettable learning experience this June by signing up at sage.co.uk/webinars. We'll see you there.
Great, thank you. So that was just my colleague Matt explaining a little bit more about that Pensions Discovery badge. We do have the sessions for that starting next week. So if you are around and you want to know a little bit more about them and of course earn that badge, definitely get yourself signed up for those. Just very quickly as well, we do have the Sage Help Centre, so that's sage.co.uk/help. All of the help articles and things that I've linked on the sides have come from here, so it's a really, really great resource. If you just need a little bit more information about a certain topic, or maybe you've got a particular error message coming up in the programme, type that into the Help Centre and you'll kind of get like Google results almost of different help articles, which include demonstration videos and kind of extra support there. There is also a webinar section which has all of our previous recordings. So if you do want to watch previous sessions that we've done, feel free to watch those as many times as you need to. They're kind of there on demand. And yeah, if you do get in touch with us, if you need some technical support, for example, all of the contact options are there too. We've also got Sage University. So this is where you'll be able to access free e-learning courses and bite-sized learning courses, you are able to set up a completely free account on there too. Great way to expand your knowledge and get some certifications for the training that you do on there as well. But yeah, apart from that, looks like we are about out of time. So if you are leaving us today, I just want to say thank you so much. Hopefully you have enjoyed that. And one last ask from me is that you will see a short survey as you exit the webinar. If you do have just a moment to fill that out, I would really, really appreciate that. If you've got anything to say about the webinar or anything to say about myself, that would be great. So thank you in advance. But as I promised at the beginning, I am going to go ahead and answer your questions now. So if you've got any, get those in the chat now, and I will stick around for a couple of moments just to make sure I've kind of got all those answered before we end the webinar. You can copy and paste those if you want to keep them for future reference too. But for the rest of you, do keep an eye on your emails for a recording of this webinar coming through. But yeah, as I say, I'll keep the webinar open for a few moments, and other than that, I will see you next time. It's goodbye for now.